been sold the idea that financial independence is all about some number on your account statement, or even worse, that you don't qualify because of where you started out. That's just not true. It's not about some well-kept secret of the wealthy. It's about finding the right information and knowing how to apply it. On the Get Ready for the Future show, we're answering your questions so you can start making real financial change today. The journey to true financial independence begins right here, and it starts with you.
From the 6th floor of 3 Financial Center in West Little Rock, Arkansas, this is the Get Ready for the Future show. My name is Scott Inman, along with GenWealth co-founder Janet Walker, as we get set to answer your questions on today's show and helping people discover, protect, and share true financial independence along the way. Wherever you get our show, we are glad to have you along. We're live streaming on this Wednesday, November 6th, but we know the audio version is on podcast and also on radio. And as it is November 6th, that's important because it is the first Get Ready for the Future show following the presidential election, which happened just yesterday. And as everyone knows by now, I'm sure that the former president, Donald Trump, has been elected to a second term after not being president for 4 years. The Republicans are predicted to have control of the Senate. So changes, a wave of change, right, as is usually the case after an election. Americans do tend to change the partner they came with a lot of times.
That's true.
That's one of the checks and balances I think that the American voter produces. But I think it's important too, Janet, before we dive in, I did a fastest 4 piece. I came in this morning and I saw what the market was doing. Mm-hmm. And the market is flying. It's taking off. When it first came out of the gates, the small cap index, the Russell 2000, was up right at 6%, which is just a crazy number. There's a huge exuberance that there will be lower taxation, lower regulations, what Trump's policies might mean in the future. None of that are reality right now. And we are oftentimes fond of saying that things are never as good or as bad as they may seem. And we've spent a lot of time in the pre-election year, this year during the pre-election months, talking about how not to let your politics get in the way of your investment strategy. And I would say it's a good time to put a little bit of the brakes on the exuberance here and not go all in on the wrong strategy because what you think may happen.
Yeah, we talked about, you've addressed this, you've talked about the psychology of if your candidate is winning beforehand, if they're leading, or if your candidate is behind, then a lot of times it dictates how you feel about the future. And I'll say I've been there in the past on both sides of that equation. When my candidate has won or lost, then I'm like, oh, here we go, whatever. But I think after this many presidential elections, we won't say how many, you get to a point where you go, it's going to be okay. Whether your candidate won or lost, it's going to be okay. And I say that absolutely from a spiritual point, even like it at the end of the day, I'm not the one in charge of any of that anyway, and it's all going to be okay. But to speak to the markets, which is really, that is very relevant to our clients as investors. We said, every time we've talked about the election, almost, we have talked about that the markets really don't care which side gets elected. It just wants an answer. It just wants to know who's it going to dance with for the next 4 years. And then it goes up. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. And so, the Republican side of our nation would say it's because Trump this, Trump that, whatever. If we had gone the other direction, then they would say it's because Kamala this, Kamala that, whatever. The market just wanted an answer, and it has one. And so I would encourage you that if you feel like you're on the not the winning side of this presidential election, just remember the market didn't care. So like your investments don't have a political party.
Yeah. I told my 15-year-old son driving him to school today, in fact, that I've been voting now. My first presidential election to vote in was 1992.
Yes.
And I told him, I said, I'm going to be quite honest. There has been change in this country in that time frame. Yeah. There's no question in a lot of ways. But my life, my career, my advancement, my building of a future for my family and for myself has really not had not been impacted in any great way by who the president was.
You've moved forward
Yep.
regardless of who was in office,
Yep.
and I think that that's where we need to be. And I know that this one statement is not going to solve this problem, but I'm just going to go ahead and say it. We've got to learn to be nice to each other, even when, if one's wearing blue and the other one's wearing red.
Right.
We just got to learn to get along again, y'all, because we have, even in our candidates, and this started years ago, but even in our candidates for quite some time now, it has been just the way that they do things to attack each other and their followers. And that comes from both sides, absolutely. And we've got to move on from that. And I think that has to start with us, because when we're having those conversations in our family, somebody out there is talking to a future president at their dining room table, and we've got to change from that. But I'll get off my soapbox, because I know my commentary is not going to impact anybody on that.
It might. This is a better forum than doing it on Facebook, probably, right?
Yes.
People are listening. So as we get into the question and answer, I think the point I was trying to make about the presidential elections in my own personal life is, as we say all the time, it is not about the economy, it is about your economy.
Yeah.
And that's the focus when we answer these questions. They're questions about someone's individual economy and what decisions should they make to improve that and really move them along the journey toward true financial independence. So let's dive in. Philip via email writes, my wife and I know we're likely going to have to help take care of her parents during their retirement. What's the best investment vehicle for us to have some or total control of to help fund those types of expenses? Philip, thanks for the email. A little bit of clarity probably needed in what he is talking about there when he talks about investment vehicle and to have some control for the parents. I think the first piece here is if they are your funds and they are in your account, then they are under your control.
Right.
And if they're in the parent's name in their account, they're under their control. And right now there's not a whole lot that you can do about that. If they do belong to your parents, the question we'd have to ask now, because we don't know the answer, are they capable, Janet, of managing their own accounts now or in the future? Because I'm not sure if that's what he's getting at with this question. If he's wanting control of the decisions about the funds and what to do with them.
Is it that they may not be able to make those decisions anymore at a certain point in the future, or are you going to have to help them financially because they haven't saved, and invested to get to that point? So there's several areas, and we'll just assume that everybody needs to know these answers regardless of what Philip's details were. So we'll go in several different directions here. One of the things, Philip, that we would encourage you to discuss with your wife's parents is a power of attorney. And let me be clear, we are not attorneys. We're not giving financial advice. I think that you need to seek the advice of an attorney to kind of walk down this road, but we see this enough that we can explain, just the basic premise and what you need to seek further counsel about. So a power of attorney can be written one of two ways. They're springing or non-springing. And what that means is if a power of attorney is written as a springing document, then it usually requires two doctors to sign off on it, saying that the person who's granting this power of attorney is now no longer able to act on their own behalf, physically, mentally, whatever the case may be. They are not capable of doing what needs to be done for themselves. And so the doctors signing off on this, their authorization springs that power of attorney into effect. My husband and I have a non-springing power of attorney. I will tell you that is not in everybody's best interest. Literally today, if Stephen wanted to, he could sell my shares of GenWealth. That is a deep and significant amount of trust to put in another person. And so you want to be very careful about how that's done if you're the person who is granting that power of attorney, because they can sell your house out from under you, the whole kit and caboodle. So just be sure that you, if you're on the parent side of this equation, that you know what you're doing in that. But that can establish you as decision makers, Philip, you and your wife, if you are given power of attorney that can establish you as decision makers on the financial aspect of things, do keep in mind that healthcare is different. That's a different power of attorney than what we're talking about currently.
Now, he asked about the best investment vehicle. I think before we talk investments, we need to talk about income planning, because I think it would be very important for Philip to maybe think about creating 2 separate income plans, one for him and his wife, and then one for his parents. And then how that actually gets implemented would obviously be a process. But at least knowing, walking through the process with a financial advisor on how much money your parents are going to need on a monthly basis and how much you're going to need when you get to retirement on a monthly basis. And then is there discretionary income that can be layered in on both of those plans, could be very helpful to understand if you have enough assets collectively to be able to take care of both your parents and you and your wife. So that is important. But I think when it comes to the investment vehicle question, there are certainly lots of investment vehicles out there available that can help provide that income. Annuities are a great tool or investment product that some offer a lifetime income rider on. So depending on whose life the annuity is, or who the annuitant is in the annuity, there would be a lifetime income attached, possibly for one of your parents, and it could be a joint income rider as well. So in essence, you could allocate a certain amount of money into an annuity that would provide a certain amount of monthly income guaranteed for both of your parents' lives. That could be a potential help. Some of these annuities also offer nursing home riders. So if you're talking about the high cost of potential long-term care cost, that could be a possibility too, that they allow you to withdraw more funds from the annuity contract if someone needs care. So that's a way to access more income. And certainly we should say the usual annuity disclaimer, they are complex investment products, and this is not an investment recommendation for you, Philip. But there are investment vehicles out there, Janet, that can help provide a lifetime income that can provide peace of mind so that you're not going to run out of income for your parents.
Absolutely. And another product resolution to potentially consider is long-term care coverage. Yep. Philip, I don't know how old your parents, or your in-laws rather, I don't know how old they are or what their health situation might be. So it may or may not even be an option for them, but it's definitely something that you just kind of want to check the box on. We have considered it and we've made an intentional decision to either pursue it or not to pursue it. And you might also want to consider this for yourself, depending on what your age and health situation is as well, so that you can check that box for future generations. But a long-term care policy, Scott, I think a lot of times people just automatically assume that they're going to a nursing home. If they've got a long-term care policy, that's what it's for. But really, there was a shift quite some time ago in how long-term care policies were built, so that it's not just a nursing home deal. Like, really, many of them are built to enable you to stay at home and be as independent as possible for as long as possible. So if that's something that might still be a fit for your in-laws to consider, then certainly put that on your list of things to just check the box on that and make sure if you need it that you have gone down that path.
Philip, thanks for the question. Before we move to our next question, I want to remind everyone about our upcoming GenWealth Academy workshop, How to Maximize Your Social Security. It's next week, November 12th at 6:30. The Max event venue in Conway is the location. It's free to attend. If you have questions about Social Security, when to claim, all of those things, you can bring that to our workshop, and it'll be a great presentation. I've seen it before. Visit getreadyforthefuture.com/academy. You can register there, and you can also find access to all of our upcoming events.
Scott, I heard through the grapevine yesterday that this event in Conway on November 12th is almost maxed out already.
Yep.
So if you're going to go, like as soon as you hear this, go ahead and go register now because they are almost filled up.
Getreadyforthefuture.com/academy. We'll register and reserve your seat. Next, our question is from Russell in Benton. I'm 67 and will have $6,000 a month in retirement income. The bulk of my $3 million is in stocks. I'm not sure how to adjust my investments before I retire next year. What should I do. Russell, thanks for the questions. Good solid $6,000 a month in retirement income. What we don't know is what are the sources of that. We're not sure from the question, Janet, whether the $6,000 or a portion of that $6,000 a month is coming from the stocks, coming from the dividends off the stocks, or if he's saying he already has $6,000 in guaranteed income. So we need to look at that. What sources of guaranteed income do you have, and is that enough to pay your expenses?
So the things that we would put into that guaranteed income category are pension and Social Security. Normally when people are coming to us at the beginning of their planning stage, they don't have any other guaranteed income source like an annuity. So we're going to look at that pension and Social Security if you have one or both of those and determine what that total is, and then if there's a gap. So you've talked about that you would have $6,000 a month in retirement income. Is that pre or post tax, and is that enough? And for some people, it would be way more than enough, and for other people, it would not be anywhere close to enough. So there's not like a right or wrong answer on it's enough. It is, what is your answer? What do your expenses look like in retirement? So it's very important to determine what you have going on as far as the required income coming from guaranteed income sources. And then, Scott, you were talking about that $3 million in stocks. There's a lot of ways that could look.
Right. Yeah, that's a big question I have, is when he says, is it in stocks, is it in individual stocks, or are they in stock funds? Because that would be a major point of emphasis here for me to talk about. If they are in individual stocks, I would certainly think at 67 that it is time to adjust your investment strategy. Now, if we do that income planning and that $6,000 a month is coming in from other sources, and that's all you want and that's all you need in retirement, then you really are looking at a purpose for this $3 million that is not immediate. So growth is not something we would tell you to back away from by any means, but concentration in individual stocks with $3 million would be a pause for us.
It absolutely would be, but I'll add a pause to that as far as just doing anything immediately. If you've got $3 million in individual stocks, my next question is how much of that is gains?
Right.
And
where is it? Is it non-retirement or retirement money?
Exactly. Yeah. And so if it's in retirement accounts, then you have some choices, and you don't have to worry about capital gains taxes on that. You can liquidate inside of the IRA shelter and buy something else, and you're not realizing those gains in terms of having to pay taxes. You are realizing gains, but it's not going to give you a taxable impact. But if you have this in some non-qualified assets, and those are, you've got any significant gains there, then that is a significant possibility as far as your taxes are concerned. And you can offset, at many times, Scott, we've seen this when people will come in with a statement and they're like, well, this one is up $500,000, but we look across everything else and maybe there's $400,000 in losses over time and some of the other things. So it's offset. So you can wash the net impact between the gains and the losses and lower your tax impact on that. But I just want to, I kind of rambled on that a little bit, but I want to give you some caution about just pulling the trigger and saying they said I didn't need to have $3 million in stocks. Be cautious about how you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other piece to this too is if it isn't a non-retirement account and you're not really planning to use this during your lifetime,
yes,
and it's a legacy piece, it's going to be passed on, you have a great opportunity to do that in a very tax-efficient way. This has become really more into clearer view with the inherited IRA rule. It used to be that was a pretty tax-efficient way to pass money on, but it's not anymore because the next generation inheriting those IRAs has to pull it out by law over a 10-year time frame, which can create a huge tax bomb for the next generation. But a non-retirement account with huge gains that haven't been realized can be passed on to the next generation, and they receive a step up in cost basis. So let me explain what that means. Let's say at 67, Russell bought some of these stocks a long time ago, and if he bought it at $10 a share and now it's worth $50 a share, if he were to sell it in his lifetime, there would be a $40 per share capital gain, right? There would be gains that he would have to pay taxes on. But if he passed away with that price of $50 per share, his inherited money would actually receive a step up to the $50 per share cost. So we would bypass that $40 of gains, Janet, and receive if they sold it that day, right, the day after the death, and there was no more step up from $50, they would not actually, it would not be a taxable event.
So all of that to say, I think we have more questions than answers, but but when we can get answers to our questions, then we can answer yours at the end of the day. So I think it comes back to the need for an individualized plan, that we have a big picture, but the details on your individualized retirement income plan really matter.
This is our question of the week. We want to congratulate Russell. Thank you for reaching out, and we will send you a free Get Ready for the Future Show tumbler. All you need to do is email us and claim it, show@getreadyforthefuture.com. And if you've got questions, or if you'd like to be the question of the week and get that free tumbler, all you have to do is call or text to 501-381-5228. Ask us your question via text, or leave a voicemail for us, or even send us an email to that address I just gave you, show@getreadyforthefuture.com, and we could name you next week's question of the week. Our next question on the show is from Dany in Little Rock. I've got 2 kids in college and a mortgage of about $850,000. My husband and I both work with decent paying jobs. My question is, how do I know if I have enough life insurance coverage for me and my spouse? I want to be sure that if something happens, my kids are okay. Great question, Dany, and it is certainly important to have life insurance in play when you have kids either in college or in the home, you have some debt, you have a spouse, and analyzing that is vitally important. And I think first up, I would say, don't focus too much on the mortgage, or at least on the mortgage alone. Focus on income replacement. In other words, what happens if you or your spouse do not come home? And I think it's understandable that people start with that debt, and I'm glad they gave us that information. And that's a big mortgage, $850,000.
It is.
But that's, if you're replacing your income with the life insurance, you can continue to make the payments and not have to wipe it all out.
Yeah, you just hit on a key. Scott, just because I'm a female advisor, many times when we've had somebody come in where a wife has had her husband pass away, so she's she's a recent widow and comes in and goes, what do I do? I have seen, I can't tell you how many times I've had the conversation of, she's sitting there crying and she's scared to death and she just wants to feel secure. And so what we see so many times is that the widow wants to pay off the mortgage. It is just this almost survival instinct to go, if I pay off the house, I'll be okay. Nobody's going to come get the house if I just use the life insurance money to pay off the house. Well, if you use that, whether it's an $850,000 mortgage or a $100,000 mortgage, if you use that money to pay off the house, then you no longer have that money to generate income for you. And so, Scott, you started in exactly the right place on where we have always started this conversation, that it is about income replacement. Mm-hmm. So if you can replace enough income that the mortgage payment can be made, then we just keep making the payments and we move on. But we also continue to have our same standard of living in every other area of life. I'm meeting with a relatively recent widow. I've been meeting with her recently and will continue to for a while to kind of go through these early phases. And for them, they don't want to pay off the house because they might want to move.
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah, and you wound up doing that too. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as someone who has lost a spouse, that is another reason that I would definitely consider not paying it off, because now I knew right away that I was probably not going to stay there very, very long. I don't know that people feel that way immediately, but I can tell you of the widows and widowers I do know personally, eventually they will want to move, whether it's a year or 2 or 3. So to have that flexibility to be able to replace your income and just keep rocking along like you did when your spouse was alive, and then have the life insurance money in a different place in an account, right? So that you can see what you can do in the future, I think makes a lot of sense.
So if you think of life insurance as a replacement of your spouse's income check, then it's almost on the investment side, it gets treated very much like a retirement account, because a retirement account is to generate income for a retiree for the rest of their life. Well, you might be 40, but your spouse passed away, but you need that income replaced. So investment-wise, on our side of the equation, it is very similar. So, Dany, to get to your question about, how do you know if you have enough, we really want to look at, if your husband did not come home, how much income would you need to have replaced of his income? And we'll back into, from that figure, we'll back into how much life insurance there needs to be on him to generate that income for you. And then the same question for him, Dany, if you were to not come home tomorrow, how much income does he need replaced from your check on an ongoing basis? And we back into that to get that total figure of how much life insurance needs to be there for each of you.
And I think we need to define too, I want to make sure my kids are okay. What does that mean? With 2 kids in college, I'm not sure if you're saying they still live at home, so that would be back to the mortgage, or if you want to make sure that their college is paid for, that would be another component to this, because you think about that, the acronym DIME, that's what we use a lot too, is the D is for debt, the I is for income, the M is mortgage, and then that E is education or other expenses. So if that's a consideration, that would need to be layered into the death benefit that you have as well. But also, what do you have in retirement assets, and when do you plan to retire? That matters as well, because we do believe the need for insurance diminishes the closer you are to true financial independence. Because when you are financially independent, you are, in essence, self-insured.
Yes, and you think about, you and I are in very similar stages as far as the age of our children. I have one in college and one who's beyond that age of life right now. And so we don't have anybody that, if our house wasn't there, if we sold the house, it's okay. Like, they're at a stage of life that they can live somewhere else, and I'm no longer responsible for every meal that they eat and all of those things, So my responsibility, my financial responsibility for my children is much different at their ages of 18 and 21 than it was when they were 8 and 11.
Yeah. Good question. Thank you, Dany. We got to move on and get to our final question as we're running out of time on today's show. Our last question is from Georgina in Fayetteville. I want to leave a good amount of money to my grandchildren. What's the best way for me to do so without hindering them too much with taxes? Well, the first question we'd have back for you, Georgina, is what does a good amount mean? Because if we're talking about $1,000 or $2,000, that's pretty easy to solve. If we're talking about a major inheritance, we need to determine, first of all, where is the money? Because one non-tax efficient way that we've already alluded to is to have it in IRAs and leave it in IRAs and only maybe take required minimum distributions and drop a couple of $1 million into the next generation's pocket. You need a plan to get it out of the IRA and move it into something else, because that could be a real big tax bomb. Some of the options to do that: if your income is low particularly, or even moderate, it might make sense to do some yearly Roth conversions from traditional IRAs into Roth IRAs. You would pay the taxes in the tax year that you made the conversion, or for the tax year that you made the conversion, but then moving forward, it would be tax-free for your children or grandchildren in your case, and it never has to be it does have to come out over the 10 years, but it will never be taxed. You could also take some IRA withdrawals, pay the taxes on it, again, incrementally along the years, and then reinvest the money. And then you get back into a non-retirement account conversation like we had on a previous question, where you can get a step up in cost basis, and that would be a pretty tax efficient way. But the other thing too is there is a way to just gift cash to your grandchildren directly now. And I think that's the other question. Do you want it left behind later, or do you want to give them some now?
And I think it's a question of when do you want them to have the benefit of it, because they might have the money now and get the benefit later. But I'll tell you what my mother-in-law did with 4 kids. She obviously wanted her children to have the majority of what she left behind, but she wanted the grandchildren to have something, and so she gave each grandchild $1,000. Well, $1,000 doesn't sound like a whole lot when they're as young as they were. But what we did with both of our kids, we set that money aside, and then when each of them got a job, and they both worked some as teenagers, so when each of them got a job later, that $1,000 went in as a Roth contribution. They had to have earned income for us to do that, but when they had earned income, that $1,000 that had just been basically sitting in savings for them was then put into the Roth IRA. So now, Scott, they've got this tax deferred and tax free, as long as they leave it alone, over the years, tax free growth until their retirement. So what their mama gave them as $1,000, when we went through and looked at how young it got invested and a reasonable growth rate of return, I don't remember exactly what we figured on that, but they were going to have basically $250,000 from that $1,000. Yeah. So it's a huge impact on their retirement because it got done so early in their lives, but it didn't cost the grandmother a whole lot to be able to give that amount to the grandchildren.
So let's talk about gifting. There is a possibility you can give pretty large amounts to your grandchildren, in fact. The annual gift tax exclusion for 2024 is $18,000 per recipient per year without incurring any gift tax. Now let's explain what that means. There is a lifetime estate tax exemption or exclusion available right now through 2025 that is $13.69 million for an individual. So if you're wanting to gift to your grandchildren and your estate happens to be larger, if you have a $15 million estate, the actual first $13.69 million can go out without being subject to the estate tax. So it's probably not going to come into play for most people. And so there really isn't, in essence, a gift tax per se. You can actually give away $18,000 per child, per grandchild.
Right, and above that, you just have to report it. But again, you're probably not going to hit that exemption level. One of the things that you might also consider, depending on the age of the grandchildren, you can pay for college tuition, and that's not considered a gift. So if you think about that, that could be a blessing to both your children and your grandchildren, because I don't know in your family who's paying the tuition. Is the student getting student loans that they are then responsible to pay in the future, or is the parent carrying that weight? So that could be also a benefit, and it doesn't count against this $18,000 amount at all.
Now, one note to wrap up here, that exemption of $13.69 million is expected to sunset. Not expected, it will sunset at the end of 2025. So if nothing is done to keep it, beginning in January of 2026, that goes down from $13.69 million per individual to $5 million per individual. And it's bounced around over the course of history at all different levels. Now, again, with the election in the rearview mirror now, I think the expectation would be that it would be extended at that $13.69 million or maybe even a higher rate. But just good to know for high net worth individuals that amount could be going down and could be a significant tax problem in the future. You heard the final bell there, Janet. It's time for our final thoughts.
Yeah, I think we'll focus on our mission statement here, really relative to Georgina's question. She's talking about, leaving a good amount of money to her grandchildren. At GenWealth, we help people discover, protect, and share true financial independence. And so if you are looking for somebody to help you walk through these conversations of I've reached financial independence for myself, what do I do to share that in the future with kids, the grandkids, charitable organizations, wherever that needs to go? That is part of our purpose. We are not just here to help our retirees, although that is very significant to what we do, it is discovering, protecting, and sharing true financial independence.
What a fun thing to be doing too, to be thinking about, hey,
Yeah.
I'm good. My financial independence is all set,
Yeah.
but I can impact future generations in a prudent way, in an effective way that's not just giving away my money and I don't care what they do
Right.
with it, but to actually make an impact in their lives.
It's tremendous.
It's a great
Yeah.
opportunity. So we would definitely encourage you to take advantage of walking through the GenWealth Ready to Retire process and discovering that and how to share it with others. And my final thought is, don't forget about our Social Security workshop entitled How to Maximize Your Social Security. It's next week, November 12th at 6:30. And as Janet mentioned, it is very close to being full. It's at the Max event venue in Conway. You can reserve your seat by going to getreadyforthefuture.com/academy. And that is all the time we have. We're out of time again on the Get Ready for the Future show. Happens every week, but it still seems to go by awfully fast. If you've got questions for us for next week's show, get them in. Anything money related, you can call or text them to us at 501-381-5228. See you next time.
The GenWealth financial team is available to you 24/7 at info@getreadyforthefuture.com or call our offices at 866-653-PLAN. That's 866-653-7526. You should personally consult a financial advisor before making any investment, and no strategy can assure success. Securities offered through LPL Financial. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advice offered through Independent Advisor Alliance. Independent Advisor Alliance and GenWealth Financial Advisors are separate entities from LPL Financial.